Over the month of October 2022, Ye, formerly known as Kanye West, held the collective attention of online America with a series of controversial posts and statements about Jewish people which ran the gamut from veiled threats to highly personalized conspiracy theories. In November, as I was editing this vid, things got even weirder when Ye announced his upcoming presidential bid would be managed by Milo Yiannopoulos, a dogmatic ideologue who was exiled from the Republican Party in 2017 for endorsing child abuse, and Ye was subsequently seen attending Mar-a-Lago with Nick Fuentes, a white nationalist with a cult-like online following, whose agenda is to push America to the far right on issues like gender roles and interracial marriage. It's far from being the first time that Ye has been the thing everyone is talking about. It seems like every year there is some new quote, some media stunt, some bizarre escapade that demands our immediate attention, and we get swept away in conjecture. There is sycophantic praise, vicious scorn, eyebrow-raising bewilderment, and the picking apart of every detail of Ye's public and private life in an attempt to make some sense of what he might be getting at. Everyone has their own way of rationalizing what they're seeing. Some people think that Ye is commercially minded and generates controversy on purpose to appeal to untapped audiences. Other people think that Ye is a courageous free thinker who is strategically dismantling the powers that be. Some people think Ye is purely ego-driven and bitter from his wife leaving him. Whilst multiple interpretations of Ye's behavior may have a grain of truth to them, I feel like there's an elephant in the room that no one wants to address head on, even though it's staring at us all the time in every Instagram outburst, in every TV interview, and through every tweet storm. In 2016, a member of my immediate family, someone I love a lot, started acting in ways that were strangely similar to Ye. There were outbursts, accusations, conspiracy theories, all of which came seemingly out of nowhere. Within a year, that member of my family was diagnosed with bipolar disorder, the same illness Ye received a diagnosis for in 2016. Ever since then, I observed this guy and I can't help but feel we're watching a hypermanic episode unraveling in real time. Ye's illness feels to me like the missing puzzle piece that explains all of his bizarre behavior, but nobody seems to want to dig into it or confront it head on. So obviously, I'm gonna do it. The point of this vid is not to use Ye's bipolar diagnosis to excuse the things he said, but neither will it be about condemning him as a person. Instead, I'm going to be looking through a clinical lens at Ye as a sufferer of a disorder I have had a lot of first-hand experience of, explaining how his symptoms manifest themselves, and ultimately we'll be unpacking the unusual situation that's created when a person with one of the most complex mental disorders in medicine also happens to be the most interviewed person in America. One of the things that makes Ye a unique person to listen to in speeches, interviews, and performances is that he expresses things extremely passionately in a breathless, entranced style. Words come out super fast in this unstoppable onslaught of anecdotes and non sequiturs.
My friends would text me or write me emails that say, he did this. Some of them Obama did too, but it wasn't, it's loud and stuff. Wow, the room is quiet in here. The room is quiet now and stuff.
Ye appears to have so much energy when he speaks that it's a challenge for him to actually stop and give other people in the conversation a chance to respond.
But as far as Meek Mills, Puff Daddy, whoever, none of these, all you fake hard you. Wait, hold on. Okay. All you fake hard you. You know what I'm saying? I don't give a because you can't shoot nobody anyway, and the reason why you got talk is because you did a deal, you fed.
But the most noticeable thing that sets Ye apart from other speakers is the abstract way in which he threads concepts together. This clip of Ye talking at the Oval Office begins on the subject of his deal with Adidas.
I mean, this Adidas thing made me a billionaire, and I could have lost $200 million walking away from that deal, but even with that, I knew it was more important for me to take the chance of walking away from that deal than to have no fathers in Chicago with no homes.
By the end of his sentence, Ye switches the topic of conversation to fatherless homes in Chicago, referring to the fact that his Adidas deal revolved around them having a production facility there. In the next 5 sentences after this, Ye switches topics multiple times, and I'll note these transitions on the screen as they happen.
No fathers in Chicago with no homes, and when we do have prison reformation, because it's habilitation, not rehabilitation, because we didn't have the abilities in the first place. We never had anyone that taught us, we didn't teach us. Exactly, we had no one that taught us, right? So it's more important than any specific deal, anything that we bring jobs into America and that we provide a transition with mental health and the American education curriculum that Jim has worked on.
In the space of 30 seconds, we go from fatherless homes, to prison reformation, to people's abilities, back to fatherless homes, back to the Adidas deal, forward to bringing jobs to America, and then another jump to mental health in schools. Although each sentence that Ye says makes sense, there is something very odd about the way they are threaded together and the lack of closure Ye gives to each idea. For example, when he transitions from talking about his Adidas deal to fatherless homes, you would logically expect the next thing he says to be some sort of concluding statement that explains that connection he's just drawn. So he might say, "So part of my deal involved putting a manufacturing base there, creating job security for families so fewer fathers ended up walking away from their kids." Now, the link between his deal and fatherlessness in Chicago is explained. That's the kind of detail we need. But instead of that, while the flow of his speech makes it seem like he's gonna elaborate on that point, he immediately jumps topics to prison reformation. There are other bits of disrupted language that make Ye's ideas difficult to parse. For example, he introduces the topic of prison reformation with a future clause, saying, "When we do have prison reformation." So you're like, oh, he's about to say what the world's gonna be like when prisons get reformed. But then he discards the setup and starts talking about the difference between rehabilitation and habilitation, all without breaking the flow of his cadence, or clearly signaling, nah, I want to talk about this instead. So your brain is still expecting to hear the end of that future clause, but that's gone now. And Ye is on a completely different tangent, doing an impression of an older black guy.
Exactly, we had no one to tell us.
It gives you whiplash as a listener because you keep expecting the next thing Ye says to give closure to the last thing, but it never does.
There's a lot of things affecting our mental health that makes us do crazy things that puts us back into that trap door called the 13th Amendment. I did say abolish with the hat on because why would you keep something around that's a trap door? If you're building a floor, the Constitution is the base of our industry, right? Of our country, of our company. Would you build a trap door that if you mess up and you accidentally something happens, you fall and you end up next to the Unabomber? You gotta remove all that trap door out of the relationship. The four gentlemen that wrote the 13th Amendment, and I think the way the universe works, it's perfect. We don't have 13 floors, do we?
All of this is disarming because usually when you're listening to people, you don't know exactly what they're gonna say, but the discourse markers they use allow you to reliably predict what kind of information they're gonna give you next. Whereas with Ye, it's like every new sentence is an entirely new train of thought rattling out of a machine gun, resulting in dialogue which feels disarming and surreal. People have various ways of interpreting Ye's monologues. To some, it shows Ye's spirituality. He's a man who speaks in spiritual terms because he has reconnected with God and has untapped spiritual intelligence that works in a different way to conventional intelligence. To others, Ye speaks symbolically instead of literally by choice. He speaks in an unconventional way so that he can convey deeper meanings. Some people say that Ye's way of expressing himself is just what genius looks like. If any of us were on Ye's level in terms of vision and creativity, we would talk like that. Let's not be afraid to say this out loud. All of these people are wrong. There are a few clinical terms to describe Ye's way of speaking, and the first we're going to talk about is pressured speech. This is a symptom of the manic phase of bipolar disorder, which can be understood as a compelling, virtually irresistible desire to talk.
Y'all probably saying, oh, she anxious to be on TV, which I am. I'm happy because I'm on TV. I always wanted to be on TV on Channel 9. No, Channel 11, because I wake up in the morning, and I take them to school. I always had this program about Speak Up America. Yeah. And I said, oh, man, I'm going to write there. I can do that.
They will be extremely talkative, physically active. It's sometimes impossible to interrupt a manic in a talk. They have what we will call a push of speech, meaning that they talk so rapidly that it is almost impossible and sometimes impossible to interrupt, and they may not be able to stop.
Hold on, bro. I'm on a wave right here.
Okay, all right.
You talk every day.
All right.
Pressured speech does not simply mean someone being talkative. It's more like when someone has an inability to not share what is in their head. A thought enters their brain, and within the blink of an eye, it's coming out their mouth without them ever having that vital millisecond of reflection to decide whether or not they want to say it and how they want to articulate it. You notice that Ye sometimes doesn't actually have the language he needs to finish expressing a thought. His brain is already moving on to the next one. So when he can't think of a way to express something, he just steamrolls through using ad-libs.
You saw the North Korea, but people denounce that. And you say, you said this thing, you put this whole thing. People love to say all, every, blah, blah, blah. It's not that.
At first look, you might think this patient was on speed or amphetamines because she seems so high and so hyper. But in fact, we know that she's not on drugs and did a drug screen. She's really high on manic depressive illness, on the manic phase, almost as though there's a little tiny syringe of amphetamine that's going off in her brain all the time, putting her up, giving her this elevated mood.
The reason why Ye can often give the impression of being on drugs like cocaine or amphetamines during public appearances is that pressured speech is not just something that affects bipolar people. It's also a side effect of taking certain drugs. The way that someone who's on cocaine will talk your ear off in a nightclub, just bombarding you with their stupid thoughts and opinions at relentless pace, is essentially driven by the same brain signals that bipolar people experience during a manic episode. There are other parallels with drug experiences too, like the fact that bipolar mania brings with it a sense of euphoria, of being invincible, with sensory perceptions like vision, sound, touch, and taste being elevated.
They can become euphoric. They can become so excited about the possibilities in themselves, in their world, that nothing seems impossible.
A bipolar person might also manifest paradoxical laughter, which is inappropriate for the situation they're in. The kind of behavior you might expect to see from people on acid or shrooms.
Let me go to the next furore, which has been around you in the last couple of weeks, which is your attacks.
Is that British for theory? Is that British for theory? What's theory, bro? Is that British for theory?
You actually have quite a good British accent. That's quite good. Let me ask you, if I can, about the allegations that you have made anti-Semitic comments. And in particular, when you said on Instagram, I'm a bit sleepy.
What happened when I was 17? I was committed to a mental institution. It was a bummer.
The big difference, of course, is that a person who's on stimulants or psychedelic drugs will return to normal in a matter of hours, whereas a manic bipolar person experiences these symptoms for days, nights, weeks, and all that time their brain is firing off signals to say this, say that, do these things on impulse. I know from first-hand experience how difficult it is to be a carer for someone going through it, the nights of no sleep, the bizarre scenarios you find yourself in. I can only imagine how difficult it must be living it. Separate from pressured speech, but closely connected, flight of ideas is a term which describes the phenomenon of someone's mind rapidly shifting from one topic to the next, conjuring up extraneous detail which is not relevant to the main point of the conversation.
The thoughts are disconnected, and when a person speaks, there's either a great deal of tangential, circumstantial, rambling kinds of lack of connectedness of one thought to the other.
Research papers point to the theory that mental disorders like bipolar and schizophrenia do something to the semantic network in the brain. This is the mechanism by which our brain categorizes different concepts and identifies connections between them. For example, if a friend tells you, "I've just heard an amazing record," your semantic network enables you to associate the word record with music and physical vinyls that play music and platforms where people listen to music and your favorite artists and songs and your friend's favorite artists and songs and the music you both enjoy together and frequently discuss. It's also essential to conversations that you are able to prioritize information. If a friend tells you they heard an amazing record, you can already assume the most likely place this conversation is going to go is here. They want to share music with you and discuss it, so you'll need to draw upon your shared experience of music that you have with this specific person. All of these things together enable you to engage your friend in conversation in a normal, human way, addressing the points they bring up and also inputting relevant ones of your own. Now, research papers theorize that what disorders like bipolar and schizophrenia do is overactivate the semantic network so that more concepts are being conjured up in the brain than is actually necessary for the conversation. It therefore becomes harder to suppress the topic areas which are not relevant, leading to a tendency to go off on illogical tangents. So let's go back to our example. Imagine that now, when your friend tells you they've just heard an amazing record, this does not just trigger thoughts about music, but also world records, like who can run the fastest, who can eat the most food, who has the highest net worth, records in terms of record keeping. Maybe you record things in your diary. When was the last time your accountants did an audit of your records? Recording. Is your voice being recorded right now? Remember the Watergate recordings? Do you like the taste of recorder lick? A recorder is a musical instrument that you played in nursery. You could play Three Blind Mice on the recorder right now if you had one. Your brain is being flooded with so many loosely associated but entirely irrelevant concepts. And so you lose the ability to properly engage with the thread of the conversation. You will pick concepts at random from this giant smorgasbord in your mind, and you will say sentences that are surreal and fragmented. Watch this exchange between Ye and Lex Fridman.
Steve Jobs.
Yeah.
You put Steve above like Elon's of the world. He's a designer and engineer, but he's a visionary in the design space.
Well, I would lean to him because I'm not an engineer, right? So I'm more like...
But then you're an engineer. If Steve is an engineer, you're an engineer, essentially.
Ye is asked whether he sees himself as similar to Steve Jobs, given that Steve Jobs was a visionary in the design space. Listen to how Ye responds.
He's a cultural engineer. Like the people who run the emotions of the world and run the world off of people's emotions right now are social engineers.
Immediately departing from the subject of design engineers, Ye responds on a tangent about social engineering.
And social engineering is so important, like city design. There's a fancier word for that.
From social engineering, we pivot towards civic engineering, the way cities are planned and built.
But I was in Oxnard last night to see Anthony Jeselnik.
From the way that cities are planned and built, we pivot to talking about a specific city in California called Oxnard, where Ye saw the comedian Anthony Jeselnik.
And I gotta find out what his opening joke was, because I'm doing interviews and I'm thinking I'm funny. And I like that he just kept on saying 20-year anniversary. I've been doing this for 20 years. And his opening joke was so high level, I realized that I wasn't funny. I realized that this dude is a professional at what he does.
From Anthony Jeselnik's opening joke, we pivot to Ye's realization that he's not funny.
And so many things are subjective.
From Ye realizing he's not funny, we pivot to the topic of subjectivity.
I always talk about this. It's like, people are arguing like, is Emily Ratajkowski the hottest, person? And I'm like, that's such a subjective thing. But like, if you go and shoot 3-pointers with Steph Curry, it's not subjective, right? Or if you go and compare bank accounts with Elon, it's not subjective.
From subjective things, we pivot to non-subjective things, like the basketball player Steph Curry's 3-point record being the best of all time, or Elon Musk being the world's richest billionaire.
And another thing that's not subjective, porn.
What about it?
Dick size. It's not subjective. You can measure.
A recurrent sentiment I see being expressed by people who are admirers of Ye is that his words make sense if you actually pay attention and listen. Like if you focus and you're intelligent enough to see the bigger picture, you'll actually find a lot of value and wisdom and insight in his monologues. I have not found this to be the case. For me, the more you listen to him, all that becomes clearer is the fact that he has a serious mental disorder. I don't disagree with any of the individual statements Ye makes. What Steve Jobs does is social engineering. Yeah, I guess. City design is important. True. Ye saw Anthony Jeselnik in Oxnard and found him funny. I don't doubt that. A lot of things are subjective. Agreed. A lot of things are not subjective. Agreed. However, it's the bigger picture of seeing all these ideas strung together that reveals the problem. Ye was asked whether he considered himself to be a design engineer like Steve Jobs, and he somehow rambled his way through a million different tangents to the eventual answer that everyone has a different sized penis. Indicative of a person who is experiencing flight of ideas, Ye is making loads of semantic connections that are loosely associated with one another, but completely irrelevant to the main point of the question he was asked. His mind is so preoccupied with each new idea that appears that he fails to make a single coherent argument. Now I want to tackle a thornier question about Ye's illness, which is, to what extent does his bipolar disorder affect his beliefs? For example, the ones he has about Jewish people. I've seen opinions at both ends of this debate. There are people who suggest that Ye's disorder is an extenuating factor which absolves him of a lot of condemnation currently being thrown his way. Then, on the other hand, there are people who say that his bipolar disorder has nothing to do with the views he's expressing, that mental illness and bigotry exist in isolation from one another and should not be conflated. I think the reality is actually incredibly messy. Bipolar disorder does not just affect the way a person acts, it also drastically impacts the way they think. Hallucinations and delusions are pretty common, affecting 60% of bipolar sufferers, and mental health professionals have documented several categories that the delusions tend to fall into. One of the most prevalent types is grandiose delusions, which cause a person to believe they are more powerful, rich, smart, or talented than they really are.
What do you mean by Olympic abilities?
Olympic basketball skills. I know I got Olympic basketball skills. I'm better than Oscar Robertson.
I'm Paul, or I'm Ya.
Ya sounds like a god, just the name to me.
Yes. He's the greatest mind there's ever been, and mine is.
The difficulty of assessing delusions of grandeur when it comes to Ye is that he is an enormously rich and successful person who's achieved more than most people could ever dream of in their lifetimes. So when he says he is the best, the voice of a generation, a visionary, it's egotistical. But it's arguably true. Who else has managed to do what he's done? He is a peerless guy in the music industry and in fashion. However, I would argue that he also has implausible delusions that would be clinically diagnosable as symptoms of his disorder, and that these come out in statements that are clearly not linked to his achievements in culture.
I have ideas that can make the human race existence within our 100 years better.
I think God uses me for a time like this. He put me in this situation.
I am the visionary. I can end war. I am fighting a battle in the spiritual form. I just so happen to be a bright part of God's army. They put me as the prophet.
Ye is undeniably a hugely important and influential person, but he's not the savior of the human race. His words can't change the material fabric of the universe we live in or end wars. That is the work of a religious deity, not someone who is good at making music and selling shoes. The same goes for Ye's engineering ideas.
Where I've got to with my research is that there will be a hole at the top that allows natural light, natural air, and there's a constant water system, so it becomes like a water city where it's a constant flow that's not, it's regenerative, it's not wasting the water, and it's just a constant flow. So I put the toilet really close to where this I don't want to call it a wave pool, but in the pool, the water is not still.
So that exists in water, surrounded by water.
Well, the living room is you have two rooms. You have the dry room, which people would call the living room before, and then you have the wet room.
This is so common for people who are experiencing mania to feel like they've landed on an inspirational idea that will change society.
Well, this is the work I've been doing. You know,
Right.
this is really important, and it's my cure for cancer.
Okay.
That's what it is. You know, it's all written down here.
Have you ever had anything like this before in your life, where you felt full of energy and lots of bright ideas?
No,
It's not
but this has been
before.
going on for so long that I can't really remember anything else. You know.
But what they've actually written down, what they've actually got on paper, is nonsensical. This guy hasn't found the cure for cancer, and Ye hasn't stumbled upon an amazing engineering solution. He just thinks he has because of delusions of grandeur. But the delusion that we could point to as the driving force of Ye's recent controversies is paranoia. Paranoid or persecutory delusions cause a person to believe that other people are trying to hurt them without any logical indication that this is the case.
I was just so paranoid that people were trying to kill me, that people were after me, and when my husband came to talk to me, I just started hitting him and screaming, and I ran off to my room and hid, and I remember thinking like, oh, all these people are after me, and then kind of like my rational brain would think, well, why are they after you? And then I think, well, I don't know, but how can you be sure that they're not?
Ye uses incredibly violent language when describing the intentions of people he sees as his enemies.
My so-called friends / handlers around me, they said stuff like people get killed for wearing a hat like that. They threatened my life. They put my life. They basically said that I would be killed. You know, they moved us to one of the most agreed upon to be one of the most dangerous places in the world. It's almost like they tried to kill me or something.
Wow. This is really like the Malcolm X movie. They're really gonna send some black people to kill me.
If I go to somebody's block and somebody shoot at me, kill one of my homeboys, then it's they whole block. Now you get it?
Yeah.
Now you get it?
But for the record, nobody's killing Kanye. Everyone loves Kanye. Are we right? Everyone loves.
Ye doesn't say that people are going to ridicule him or cancel him or screw him over financially, but kill him. And given his current condition, it's not out of the question that he believes this in a literal sense. The same goes for the claim that his children were kidnapped by the Kardashians.
And the Kardashians kidnapped my daughter in public, and I didn't have the address of my child. This family kidnapped my kids in broad daylight. Shut the f up unless you was there when the Kardashians kidnapped my kids.
Having a birthday party and not inviting the dad is not the same thing as kidnapping a child. More recently, Ye aired a completely new conspiracy theory that the medication he was previously taking to treat his condition may have been part of a plan to poison him.
They wanted to medicate me every day. You realize, like, they could have just switched the medication and I wouldn't be here. And on the news, they would have said it was because of a mental issue.
In the same interview, Ye claims that his mother, Donda, didn't just die. She was actually sacrificed by the powers that be in Hollywood in order to traumatize him.
You know, out in Hollywood, a lot of people come up missing. Feels like it might be a lot of that in order to control, traumatize. They can't control me. My mom ain't here. My mama was sacrificed.
Me too.
You understand?
Yeah.
Personal story time. When my family member with bipolar was going through their manic episodes, they were paranoid about loads of stuff. This included people serving them at the supermarket, cars they saw on the street, and random statements that came up in conversation. And these paranoias caused them to act in completely insane ways. They ended up spreading vicious rumors about the people who were closest to them. They had aggressive confrontations with me about things that had never actually happened. And they deliberately sought out the company of people who indulged their paranoid beliefs. So in the end, there was no one left to challenge them and say, look, you're imagining these things. I can't express how out of character all that behavior was for this family member of mine, who was, before their bipolar mania, the kindest, most rational and civic-minded person I know. This is why it's so messy trying to separate Ye's condition from his actions. To me, his condition is the core engine driving the actions. Admittedly, there are some specific features to Ye's bipolar that don't manifest in other people. The fixation on the Jews, the through line of Candace Owens' conservative talking points. I have no doubt that these are beliefs Ye sincerely holds, bipolar or not, but it's Ye's mania that elevates them from being the kind of thoughts one might mull over in their head to Ye declaring spiritual warfare that he believes God has sent him to planet Earth to fight.
You know, God builds warriors in a different way. He made me for such a time like this.
Can I just take you back a step?
Yeah,
You
sure.
said God tells you.
God tells me.
Can you tell me a bit more about that?
Well, he tells me. He just talks to me.
Whether or not you think it absolves Ye of blame for the narrow-minded beliefs he's been preaching recently, there is a meaningful distinction between someone who is able to keep those thoughts in their head or articulate them in a careful, considered way, versus someone whose mouth is an open door to their brain. Something which complicates everything a bit more is the fact that Ye, who in 2019 was acknowledging his bipolar disorder and explaining all the ways it affected him, now claims he never actually had bipolar disorder, that he was just suffering from exhaustion and was misdiagnosed on purpose by a Jewish doctor.
The thing about the red hat that drove me to a point of exhaustion, which was misdiagnosed by a, I'm not going to say what race, what people, doctor, and what hospital and what media it went to. We know I can't say that. It was a Jewish doctor.
So do you believe that you have any form of mental illness?
I believe that I suffered from exhaustion. I suffered from being lied to constantly by the people around me. And I believe those things can drive anyone to a point of maximum exhaustion.
Now, exhaustion alone doesn't typically make a person run around newsrooms in a state of manic euphoria and lose control of their semantic networks, but mania certainly does those things, as well as making it very difficult for bipolar people to go to sleep.
How's your sleep been?
Not a lot, but I don't really need it. It's not that I feel tired. It's just that I don't feel like sleeping.
Have you been sleeping at all?
No time to sleep.
No time to sleep. When was the last time you had a good night's sleep, would you say?
Don't need it.
Don't need it.
I've got this enthusiasm from God.
Additionally, as any mental health worker will tell you, a manic bipolar person claiming they've been wrongly diagnosed by doctors is nothing new. It's a tale as old as time, the oldest trick in the manic bipolar playbook.
Who's told you you've got bipolar, Paul?
Every psychiatrist that I've met, I've been labelled as being something that I'm nowhere near. My so-called bipolar disorder doesn't exist.
And are you concerned about your behavior?
No.
Or? You feel good?
I feel fantastic. It's not really any reason why I should be here as far as I'm concerned. I mostly came out of the courtesy. I feel really fantastic. And so it's not really a medical thing.
And you know how you were saying that your mate at work said that you were...
Who, Dave?
Yeah.
Yeah, he said rude things.
But it sounded like he thought you weren't very well at the moment.
No, I'm fine.
I guess, John, what I'm wondering is whether this might be a sign that you're not very well at the moment.
No, I'm fine. I want to talk about this. You seem to want to change the subject, so I don't want to talk to you anymore. I've had enough of you, and I've had enough of being out. I want to talk to somebody else. I want to talk to the boss. I want to talk to your boss. Where's your boss?
So why did Ye acknowledge his bipolar disorder 2 years ago and then start denying it recently? Well, bipolar sufferers are essentially two different people. When they're in the low phase of the condition, they are typically more lucid, but also depressed, with a hazy fog clouding their mind that stops them from feeling things they're supposed to feel. Then, when they're in the high or manic stage, they're the opposite. They are experiencing a whole new spectrum of human emotion, like they're connected to the universe and everyone around them. But this is also the stage where the person is least rational, and they manifest the symptoms we've discussed: pressured speech, flight of ideas, psychosis, delusions. And it's very hard to convince someone during peak mania that they have a problem that needs to be treated. If you compare the recent appearances Ye has made on TV to the interview he did with David Letterman in 2019, it's like night and day.
When you ramp up, I ramp up and I go high. Like,
what does that mean when you ramp up? What is that? What are we talking about?
Ramp is like when you're bipolar, if you don't take medication every day to keep you at a certain state, you have a potential to ramp up, and it could take you to a point where you could even end up in a hospital and you start acting erratic, as TMZ would put it. I feel a heightened connection with the universe when I'm ramping up. It expresses your personality more. You can become almost more adolescent in your expression, or border into places. This is my specific experience that I've had over the past 2 years, because I've only been diagnosed for 2 years. When you're in this state, you're hyper paranoid about everything. Everyone now is an actor. You feel everyone wants to kill you. You pretty much don't trust anyone. Everything is a conspiracy. You see everything. You feel the government is putting chips in your head. You feel you're being recorded. You feel all of these things.
And these are vividly realistic to you.
Yes.
It's as if Ye is prophetically describing exactly what we're seeing now in 2022. The paranoia, the belief that everyone around him is a dishonest actor, that everything is a conspiracy against him. This is why, for me, it is undeniable that Ye is currently undergoing a manic phase of his condition, something which, to take him at his word, he hasn't taken medication for since 2019.
I heard you recently, you said that you had been not on any sort of pharmaceutical medication for 8 weeks, 8 months? What was it?
About 8 months.
8 months. So, do you run the risk of this coming back? Will you always have this, or is it episodic? Is it chronic?
That's exactly what it is. Like Snoop said, about to go to the next episode.
The good news is that bipolar disorder is treatable. Antipsychotic medications can level a person out so the swings they experience are less extreme. It means they can still feel happy during their lows and remain stable during their highs. In the best case scenario, someone can take medication for a couple of months and find they never actually need it again because it permanently calms their cycles down. The problem is that the time when you really need a person to take medication is when they're undergoing an extreme manic high, but that's also the time when they're least likely to perceive their behavior as a problem. They're pumped up on manic endorphins and they are totally oblivious to the fact that the divine revelations they're having in their head and preaching to the world are just incoherent word salads. Of course, this is made even more difficult when the person in question is a billionaire surrounded by yes men, capable of firing or blackballing anyone who refuses to play along with the charade.
Is there somebody in your life close to you that you trust enough to call you out on your bullshit? We're all full of shit sometimes.
What's my bullshit? What was the bullshit?
Jewish media, Jewish...
That's not bullshit. And I said it. You're not going to make me say it 800 more times.
I'm trying to call you out on your bullshit because I hope I'm somebody you can trust.
I don't fucking trust you.
I'd like to close off this vid by talking about what made me think I needed to address this topic in the first place. And it's that whilst I've been kind of fascinated but very dismayed to see Ye living out his hypermanic episodes in the spotlight of the national media, it's been equally perplexing to see a whole cast of characters emerge who believe, or at the very least pretend to believe, that Ye's neurodivergency is a source of profound insight and wisdom.
The enemies of his ideas dismissed West, as they have for years, as mentally ill. Too crazy to take seriously. Look away, ignore him. He's a mental patient. There's nothing to see here. That was not our conclusion. In fact, we've rarely heard a man speak so honestly and so movingly about what he believes.
Kanye was built for this. He is just in a very, very positive state. He's optimistic. He understands exactly what he's doing.
He's lucid and logical. He's saying he was nearly drugged out of his mind. Some of the crazy things he may have been saying was because they were pumping him full of crazy drugs.
When you start expressing yourself freely without caring about what people think, they'll call you crazy.
He's not crazy. It's just the black community need to catch up with what he's actually doing. Some people saying that he's suffering from bipolar, or he ain't really. It's a lot of stuff that's really out there. You don't get to $2 billion and being crazy. It just don't work like that.
The Emperor's New Clothes is a Danish folktale about an emperor who is fooled into buying clothes that don't exist. He is told by swindlers that the clothes will appear invisible only to those who are simple of mind. He tries on the clothes that don't exist, and due to his hubris, when he looks in the mirror and sees himself naked, he doesn't want to admit it in case it confirms him as a dumb guy. Still unsure, however, he asks his servants in the room what they think, and humbled in the presence of the Emperor, they respond approvingly, saying how fabulous his non-existent clothes look. The Emperor then parades around the whole town butt naked, and in deference to him, every member of the townsfolk pretends to be enthralled by his non-existent drip. Apart from one kid at the very end of the story who's like, that guy's naked. The tale of the Emperor's New Clothes is about how people will disregard the evidence they see with their own eyes in deference to an authority figure who they are primed to look up to. Ye is a massive authority figure to a lot of people. He is a visionary artist, a successful entrepreneur, a renegade who pretty much does what he wants all the time, regardless of the consequences. The narrative of Ye being an unimpeachable prophet fighting a righteous battle against the establishment is an extremely appealing one to a lot of people for a lot of different reasons. For Ye's fans, it's impossible to perceive his disjointed monologues as anything other than divine prophecy, because they steadfastly believe their favourite artist must have some pioneering vision for everything he does, just like on his albums. Conspiracy theorists tend to believe that people who say crazy things are telling the truth and people who say rational things are lying. So when conspiracy theorists observe someone acting like a manic bipolar sufferer, they think they're looking at the biggest truth-telling genius they've ever seen. And for political pundits, it is useful, at least for the time being, to indulge Ye's delusions and sane wash him to their audiences. It's advantageous both for fringe right-wing figures who can gain legitimacy by attaching themselves to him and feeding him talking points, and also for mainstream Republican Party mouthpieces who can leverage Ye's celebrity status to manufacture consent for right-wing policy positions. Of course, all of this comes with the caveat that anyone using Ye for politics is playing a risky game, given that he may at any point decide to turn on people and start leaking DMs. As to the larger phenomenon of people who are not inherently political seeming to be enthralled by Ye's mania, I guess context is everything. There's a difference between seeing people voicing these fantasies to a psychiatrist versus an eccentric celebrity doing it in a well-lit TV studio or podcast space, with pundits whose jobs revolve around driving engagement, regardless of the mental state of the person they're interviewing. We are primed as viewers to expect cryptic artistic wisdom, off-the-wall commentary, and self-indulgent monologues, which blinds us to the reality of what we're actually seeing. In this context, the line between a thought leader and someone with a thought disorder becomes quite a fine one. I have no idea where we go from here, but I do know that future students of American history are gonna be baffled when they dig through the archives and find footage of Ye having his hypermanic episode in the Oval Office. There is no better example of the Emperor having no clothes. Every single person in that room knows that something is wrong, that this is not a normal way for someone to behave or to communicate their ideas. But alas, the president thinks this is good publicity. So the person suffering from flight of ideas and pressured speech is heralded as an impressive orator.
And we're putting people in positions to have to do illegal things to end up in the cheapest factory ever, the prison system.
I'll tell you what, that was pretty impressive. I hate to say this, Jim. Do you want to say something? What do you do after that?
Bipolar disorder should not be something that single-handedly defines a person. But Ye's refusal to take medication means that increasingly, his personality and attributes amount to nothing more than the worst symptoms of his condition. He is vindictive, egotistical, disconnected from reality, and dumb as rocks. None of these people currently cheering on Ye's mania from the sidelines have to live with him or take care of him. They don't have to concern themselves with where Ye goes in the middle of the night or the consequences of his actions if things go west. They get to enjoy Ye as a hobby, a symbol, a narrative, a fiction they can project onto him in whichever way makes things most interesting for them. Once the euphoria of mania stops, Ye's gonna need real friendship and real support, but in his untreated state, all he's doing is pushing the kind of people that would give him that support further and further away. I've actually got my family member back now, thanks to antipsychotic medications, and they've become my rock again. Every moment I spend with them feels precious. I can only hope that the same thing happens for that select group of people who love and care for Ye, the human, rather than Ye, the fictional concept. Yes, hope you're well. Thanks so much for watching my vid. I appreciate you spending time on my channel. The names rolling up the screen right now are my Patreon gang. Thanks all of you lovely people so much for your support. It's inordinately kind of you to throw money my way. If you are a regular Timbah video enjoyer, consider becoming one of them. I want to give a big shout out to Modelle for throwing tunes my way for this vid. Bruv, you're sick. Bad boy, grimy, trappy producer, run him up if you're into that kind of thing. I'm gonna dive straight into the Patreon question for this vid, which this time comes from Tyler. He asks, do you think Kanye's actions can be redeemed in the public eye with an apology tour? Tyler, his name is Ye, no dead naming on my channel please, but thank you very much for the question. My answer to this would essentially be yes. Ye often says he's a hard person to hate, and that's true, but not for the reason he thinks. The thing is that all of his worst decisions are born out of his diagnosable manic episodes, and that means that when he becomes lucid, he will essentially become a different person. You know, if your schizophrenic uncle runs around your house naked, you don't really hold it against him in the same way you would if someone of sound mind did that. I reckon if Ye does an apology tour in like a year's time talking about his manic state and the decisions it led him to, he would receive a lot of sympathy. I'd say there's another contingency to this as well though, which is that Ye being forgiven kind of depends on him continuing to be a relevant artist in the music world. Really, that's what's kept Ye in everyone's good graces for the last decade. While he's been an absolute toxic mess in terms of his behavior on social media, his political stances, the optics of how he conducts himself in public, he has at the same time continually managed to release era-defining album after album, from My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy to Yeezus to Donda. We could put it like this, if Ye was a DaBaby or a Chance the Rapper, his legacy would be gone by now, right? The output would be nowhere near good enough to justify you looking past his flaws as a person. But the reservoir of goodwill we have for people like Ye who consistently manage to make amazing art is substantially larger than what we have for other people. You know, that's not necessarily how it should be in a just world, but you know, that's the way the world works, son. If Ye falls off musically, that's when people will get fed up with him and the apologies will make no difference. But you know, as long as he can still pull modern relevant artists in and get 5 million features on every record he does, the old music man's probably gonna be okay. Thanks for that question, Tyler. This is a video I didn't set out to make initially. I was doing another one which discusses mental illness, and as the Ye stuff was bubbling up, this video just rolled out of that one. I'm gonna get working on that other one now and try not to ghost my subscribers for 6 months again, but let's see what happens. Thanks again for watching, and I will see you next time. Bye.
Never seen a girl who hypnotized like you, walk like you, who talk the